right, so we have a massive guest of honor. We have Nicholas Melillo, aka Nick Melillo, aka Nick R. Agua, aka the Chief of the Broadleafs. We have a Swedish saying that goes like, a loved person has a lot of nicknames, and that reflects with our guest of honor. Welcome, Nick.
Thank you, guys. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited to talk shop with you guys.
Oh yeah,
all the way from Sweden, man. I got to come visit you guys.
Yeah, we hope so. And we hope you bring plenty of foundation, because we are barren in these lands.
I know. I hope you guys don't get upset with me. I mean, we can get into that, but it's been a challenge just because of the demand in the United States and existing customers. I've been slow to open other markets. For one, I'm not familiar with a lot of them.
Of course, yeah.
So it's great to get a lot of interest. It's just not understanding, the players. Sometimes I'm very hesitant because I want to make sure I do it right.
Of course.
So that's part of the reason why it's been, slow for distribution right now.
It's good though. It's good to not rush in. I get that. Well, while I'm lighting up this El Huehuense Corona Gorda, which I'm happy that you're making so many Corona Gordas, because that's my favorite. Vitola, Ruben, you can kick off the interview.
Absolutely. I must say, I mean, I'm quite jealous sitting here as the only one not smoking in my student room in Lund, but well, you guys are both smoking foundations. But that lets me talk a little bit more, for better or worse. But Nick, when I mean, Carl and I, we often talk about how young we are and that we started smoking right off the bat when we turned 18. And we've also come across the information that was the case for you as well, and that you actually started working right away at the Calabash shop as an 18-year-old. Yes. And we were just wondering kind of what you were smoking at that time, right off the bat.
Wow. So that was, summer of '96, which was a crazy time in the cigar world, because it was what we call the cigar boom. So the height of the cigar boom. Exactly. So you had kind of in the States, the 80s, the market was really kind of dipping in the cigar sales and consumption, because I think you had a lot of older generations from after World War II that were slowly, it was shifting. And a lot of people had an image of cigars that was just kind of an older, your grandfather wearing a white t-shirt, it wasn't very much of an as elegant picture in the States of cigar smoking. And it really did start to shift in the early '90s because of Cigar Aficionado, and really coming out, and cigars appealing towards, working professionals, the next generation of smokers. So this really started what we know as the cigar boom, and it really peaked in '96 when I was 18, just starting university. And I graduated high school. My father bought me a beautiful diamond crowned humidor for graduation. And my father's father passed away when I was 15, and he was a big cigar smoker. I mean, Connecticut broadleaf cigars, that's what he always had, a cigar. So I think the fact that I took to cigars, kind of my father, because of his father, he didn't get on my case about it. He said, doing well in school, I wasn't drinking a lot or whiling out. So he was like, oh, he really loves smoking a cigar. So it was a great graduation gift. And he had bought it at the Calabash shop. And I used to go in there all the time, and it would be packed. And there was two women that owned the shop that would be running around. And this one particular day, I get up to the register and I said, here's my email. It was like email just came out. And, I gave him my number, and at that time I had learned everything I could about cigars on the market. So at that time, Macanudo, made in Kingston, Jamaica, that was a cigar that was incredible blend. Jamaican filler, Dominican filler, San Andreas Mexican binder and Connecticut shade wrapper grown in Connecticut, which a lot of it now is grown in Ecuador, but
Right.
no cellophane. There was a 6x50 called Hyde Park.
Right. Classic.
Phenomenal. Hoya de Monterrey Dominican Excalibur was one I smoked. Fuente, of course. Opus X had come out
Right.
probably a few years before that, and Opus X Torpedo, when I could get them, I smoked those at my graduation from high school.
Wow.
I had Fonseca 1010s to hand out, and then there was one called Puros Indios in that time period. That year specifically, after that year, they had a lot of issues after 96, but that was one of my favorite cigars. They had Hoya de Monterrey Rothschilds. They used to come in a 50 count wheel, and it was all Connecticut broadleaf. So those were some of them. You talk to guys now, things have sort of changed in the market. Larger companies that purchase some of these brands, others not. And then Padron it was like one of the few Nicaraguan cigars. And that became eventually one of my daily. Padron 3000 Maduro was like a cigar I consistently enjoyed.
Yeah, you kind of answered our next question. We were going to ask you a little bit about, because obviously the first examples you named were much lighter, more old school blends, but obviously then Padron Opus enters the market, it's a little bit heavier, and I guess that probably hastened your move towards, because it seems you have a preference towards that kind of stuff more than the Macanudo Hyde Park style cigars now.
Yeah, for me, it becomes about the balance of the blend, right? So I definitely tend to lean towards, fuller body, fuller strength, but I can very much enjoy a milder cigar, especially if it's a certain time period or, occasion or, a time of the day.
Yeah.
It's just, then it really does become about how the blend is put together and the balance of that blend. And I think that if you see within the foundation line, some of these blends, I'm using some really heavy leaf, like it's predominantly Viso, Ligero, middle to upper primings of but how those tobaccos all work together with the binder and then the wrapper really determine whether that's going to be too aggressive on the palate or not. So that's, I'm giving you a long spiel here, but
no, it's good.
I definitely like fuller bodies, and usually when you're first starting, you tend to get your feet wet until you can, I wouldn't recommend like a Tabernacle to somebody that's just starting.
Yeah, that's a bit.
Yeah, you got to adjust a little bit.
But yeah, obviously after this, there's a lot of interviews, so we are trying our best to not ask the same questions you've answered countless times here. But for those of you that don't know, I'd recommend maybe the Q&A article with Cigar Aficionado, because you answer a lot of like the main stuff. But obviously you moved to Drew Estate, and that's really a lot of your upcoming your formation in the industry. But I wanted to ask, because you obviously learned so much there. You went from our age to like more of an adult and really immersing yourself. But there was a point, right, where you started shifting towards the idea of making your own stuff, right? Like breaking out and establishing your own name, I guess. Was there a specific sort of moment that triggered that? Because was there an indication from Drew Estate sort of that you wouldn't be able to make your own brand within? Because we've seen like Herrera Esteli right now with like Willie Herrera, who's sort of made his own brand within the company, right? Like, was there an indication in that way, or did you, with your own consulting firm, feel like you were ready to completely fly out of the nest? Or what was it like?
That's a really great question. The decision to leave, we had all gone through a lot together. I mean,
Yeah.
I was 24 when I moved to Nicaragua. That was 2003,
Wow.
and then I left almost 12 years later. So that was a 2-year period. And it was a lot of it was prompted by FDA regulations coming from the government. So at that
Yeah.
time, we've gone through a lot of battles, and we've luckily we're still here, and the regulations haven't gotten really bad through all the fighting that has gone on from the CRA, from our trade organization PCA. But the idea of not being able to start my own company was definitely daunting. And the company was definitely going through a lot of changes at the time, and transitions. So I really felt the need to have complete independence to be able to create. And it's not that, it was anything negative. It's just the challenges of, working with someone and then being completely independent is very different. And a lot of these things and the brands that I'm creating is just things I've been interested in since really 96, like when I started smoking cigars. And I really started getting into, I went to school, but at the same time I had so many interests outside of school. History, I studied international business, but history, culture, ancient mysteries, stuff, stuff like that I had always kind of been into. And it was tough, man. It was really tough to leave. Like, I had so many conversations with my father and mentors, and I mean, I had a great job at Drew Estate. I was finally getting, a really good salary. They had made me a small partner in the company.
Okay, wow.
It's just, I knew I wouldn't be able to retire. And then I knew how much work was going into everything. I said, if I don't do it now, I'll probably not, I won't do it. And then I knew, fortunate that I had built up all this experience on the leaf side and the tobacco purchasing, the fermentation, the blending side, that I could get a job if I failed, in that, because it's not like somebody that is newer, it's not like a corporate job where somebody that is 21 will come and take your job. You become more valuable in the cigar industry as you gain experience. And so I knew I'd be able to purchase leaf or work for a leaf, on the tobacco side of things if everything went awry.
So that's interesting. That might have been the only positive impact the FDA has ever had on the cigar front, getting Nick Melillo
to start foundation.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine you wouldn't be able to start a company ever. I mean, that was at that time, that was the climate. So it was tough.
I see. Yeah. But just sticking around that time and the beginning of your time at Drew Estate, like, how fast did it take for you to get into the leaf side? Because you'd just come from working at the shop, right? So where did the big transition go from going to working with the leaf?
Sanity, man. Like, it was a very natural transition, because here I am, 24. I had learned everything you could possibly learn from not being on the manufacturing side, from books, from, the internet, from, people. So I had, history of tobacco and, just in general. So I had pretty much digested everything I could possibly from a book, fermentation, all that side. So coming off of an international business degree, in love with travel, in love with cigars, it was like, okay, now I can take these two passions in my studies and put them into real life action. So as I land in Esteli, I'm in heaven here, because now, I mean, and it's really Drew Estate was a fraction of its current size. Drew Estate was not Drew Estate.
Understood.
If we went back to that time, Drew Estate was a joke when it came to traditional cigars. They were, strictly known for infused cigars, and they were very successful. But the factory was a fraction of its size. We were working out of the back of Nick Perdomo's house that was kicked out. It was very small. They had huge production issues the year before, massive quality control problems that almost put them out of business, and they survived it. And John took a chance on me. I don't know if I would have hired myself at the time, but the company was not in a position to, hire somebody for a very large salary. If you wanted to get somebody, you'd have to poach them from somebody else. And it's such a small industry. So you don't want to become that guy that's stealing people from, and a lot of people down there helped John. So I got down there and I just really became an active observer for, months on end, and really just learning how everything was operating. And then I really learned how many quality control issues were happening. And there was just not much organization at the time. Everything was just kind of, the production floor wasn't organized. There was no formal production planning, shipment planning, tobacco purchasing worksheets. So I started slowly working with the team, implementing systems. And then at the same time, I'm learning leaf. So I'm learning how to bunch, I'm bunching cigars, seeing how the constructions happen, and then start setting in quality control nets and featured, because I had learned about the quality control issues the year before. I said, I took responsibility for everything, because I'm the only person from the States here. I need to, I have to be responsible for everything. Otherwise it's going to look bad. If it's on my watch and things go awry. So I started putting in a lot of nets for quality control. That was the first steps. And then I just started learning, man, from all of these, different Cuban and Nicaraguan people that have been in cigars for so long. And here I am amongst all of these guys that I've read about. And
that's crazy.
Here they are. And, meeting Old Man Padron, was probably the highlight of when I used to go, try to get seconds from him. And, Drew, I wasn't smoking Drew Estate's brands at the time. I maybe smoked one, or I wasn't an infused cigar smoker, but I respected it from a retail perspective. There's a place for those, especially if you're just starting to smoke. So I started, immediately playing around, learning different leaves. How does these different leaves work? And slowly over, a good 2-3 years, I had developed tons of different blends that I had just been working with. And then there's a tobacco family, not the cigar family, but a tobacco family called Oliva Tobacco Company out of Tampa, but they have a very large operation in Esteli. And they started curing Connecticut broadleaf. And that's when I sort of, here I am in the north of Nicaragua, and here's tobacco from mi tierra, my land. So I kind of took all those blends for almost 2.5 years, 3 years that I had been working on, and put together 10 blends that I thought, and that was the onset to Liga Privada. And then I just slowly, after that, it was like, all right, Nick does the blending, Nick does the tobacco purchasing. It was just a role that I just, naturally just moved into.
That's pretty awesome. Because I mean, if I were ever in that position like that, that's what I'm dreaming of. That's the route I would want to take, right? Just nerd going full in on that side. But it's so fascinating because on paper, you have a business degree and you've worked, I mean, you were 18, but like you worked in the shop, right? So like on paper, it feels like that's not the route that you should go. But it's, I mean, I find it really admirable that you do go that route and really dive into the agricultural side. And when researching you, and I mean, knowing about you for the last few years, I've been struck by the fact that you feel like the most technically involved, like sort of figurehead that I've seen. Like every time you're interviewed, you're in the field. I mean, you're really touching and being in the tobacco all the time. And I'm curious to how much that has been a benefit to you, especially now that you've branched out, right? Like being so immersed, because there's a lot of people that are more involved in the factory side perhaps, and more blenders and brand makers. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but just, you know, how much of an asset has that been to you being so involved?
It provides a great awareness and perspective on the whole. You know, I feel fortunate in that respect, having worked a shop. So understanding the consumer palate side, and then understanding the manufacturing and blending side. I will say this, you know, I'm in no way, shape, or form consider myself a farmer.
Yeah.
And I say to people just in general, you know, it's really about what you spend your time doing, right? That really makes a huge difference as to what your experience is. It really lends to your overall knowledge. So I haven't spent 8 hours, 10 hours a day, all day in farms.
Yeah.
You know, that's not where my forte is. I do understand it, but I've never claimed to be a farmer. Where I start when it's coming off the fields, you know, into the curing barns, into the fermentation, and then into the manufacturing and production side. But it's great to have, you know, the overall awareness. The challenge for me has been starting my own company and learning the sales and distribution side, because that hadn't been my experience for 12 years. So I was completely out of the sales and distribution side. So that I've been learning a lot, and that has a lot of challenges, because I always say there are 3 worlds to this industry. The farming is its own world. You know, that's its own, it's a whole nother world. And you go out to a farm and you live the farm life, it really is. Manufacturing, fermentation, production, that's a whole nother world. You know, you have farmers that don't know that world. Here in Connecticut, it's a great example that, you know, a lot of these farmers are disconnected even from the manufacturing side. That's not what they do. And then sales and distribution, whole nother world. So it's been great to have, you know, be able to have an understanding of these 3 worlds. And I think it really helps, you know, with development of the blends and the brands and just overall, I feel fortunate. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, because I mean, you've had to handle all that pretty much yourself, right? Because you haven't taken on any investors or anything like that. So it's just you've kept it all very.
For foundation, it's been, I'm just actually at that point now, you know, I've just had big calls today of just now that next level of having to implement, you know, systems, management, like, you know, get more structure. But bootstrapping and starting my own company, you know, I had investors. I didn't want to lose 30% of the company to start. You know, I left one situation to be, you know, have my own freedom. So I didn't want to then start a company and be in the same situation. So I started a lot smaller than I had originally anticipated, and wearing a lot of hats, man. Yeah. I mean, a lot of hats. People don't, it's difficult sometimes because people don't realize it. You know, like they think you're just chilling, and you know, they think it's like just the development of a blend and you know, that it's magic that it comes to the shelf. And social media definitely lends to you know, people having maybe a misconception of actually what's going into. You know, I'd be in front of fermentation piles and guys would be like, oh man, that's the best job. You can never, there's nothing more stressful than having tobacco and fermentation, because it's, it can go awry. You have
yeah, it's like a
millions
living.
of dollars that is
Yeah, exactly.
naturally fermenting.
It's just
And
doing its own thing.
if it goes awry, you literally, you lose money, of course, but then you lose time, which you can't make
True.
up,
Yeah, exactly.
and yeah, it's challenging. So,
Yeah.
but that's part of the game. So I can't complain too much.
Speaking about that, magic that kind of arises that some people might think. Um, I heard you say that in a Q&A that the 6x52 Toro was one of your all-time favorites, and that you start all of not or most of your blends from that size. And I was wondering if it's always or most often that case that you find that the ratio of that wrapper to filler binder is the best, or does it vary a lot depending on what wrapper you're using?
It's interesting, because I wonder what I've heard that used a lot now, that 6x52, and I wonder what people did before. Like 6x52 was my size. Like when I started smoking cigars, I always went with the Toro, because to me that was a good length and ring gauge that really gave you, a good reflection of the blend.
Right.
So when I started blending and rolling, in 03, 04, I just naturally started making all my sample blends in that size. And I always then just started with that, and then would work the blends from that first blend. So I knew if I got the 6x52 right, that I could work it from there and then create the other sizes. I do think it's a really good size for, ring gauge length, to really get the fullness of the blend. That's my personal preference. I see a lot of other people doing that. I think people, every manufacturer has their own way, and there's everything slightly different. That's how I really learned, right? Is like
Interesting.
Talking to different old school guys, this is how you do it. And that guy would say, no, that's not how you do it. This is how you do it. And then that guy would say, everybody would be very passionate about how they did things. And in that, I was able to kind of take pieces and kind of develop my own style as time went on, learning all these different techniques and styles, and kind of adapting them to what I thought kind of worked. But 6x52 is always where I start, really.
That's interesting. Yeah, I've never really heard anyone comment on that specifically. So it's cool to get that insight.
I mean, I do 6x52, I should say, it really does start smaller. I should say, if you're looking at, smoking individual bales, we usually are making up what I call tabacchiatos, which is basically a little burrito of tobacco. You're just rolling up from bales. So it's kind of starting there, and then kind of get an idea for individual components. And then, but when I finally do a full press and, first samples, it's always 6x52.
Right. Yeah. And another thing that's fascinated me a lot, because we've talked about how you've done a lot of stuff quite differently in your journey. Something that's really struck me is the amount of outsiders you've been working with in the shape of project, and maybe your independence has allowed you to really just kind of do whatever you want in that sense. The whole Highclere Castle project is fascinating. It's such a cool story. And then the Joe Rogan one, how does this sort of stuff come up? Because you don't see it too often, especially you've been doing this just a few years, and you have these two kind of pretty high level outside projects going on.
Yeah. The Highclere is the only project that we officially kind of partner with for a full brand. the Joe Rogan is not on the market right now. I mean, there's a lot of pressure. I need
I can imagine that.
Joe's got a lot going on. I think I got a lot going on. He's got a lot going on. So right now it's just exclusively made for him and who he kind of gives them out to. Highclere, was developed through actually a shop here in Connecticut called Mickey Blake's. The owner, Lou, there, knew my partner Adam at Highclere, and when I was first starting, he was just like, "You guys got to know each other." He was just like,
Yeah,
"You guys have to know each other. There's something like you guys got to meet, have a cigar." I just feel like you guys, something will come out of it. And Adam had been working on Highclere Castle Gin with Lord Carnarvon, and being a huge, fan of history, knowing that Lord Carnarvon, his great grandfather, discovered King Tut's tomb,
yeah,
and also the history of cigar smoking at the castle. This is where Downton Abbey is filmed, the show. I mean, it is the real Downton Abbey, and I haven't watched all of them, but my parents have watched it. But the first episode of Downton Abbey ends with them retiring to the smoking room smoking cigars. So you have this long history of cigar smoking there. So Adam, approaches Lord Carnarvon and says, we got the gin in process, but the history of cigar smoking at the castle is incredible. You got to meet Nick. He's in Nicaragua, starting his company. So, they wanted me to come to England. It was right before our trade show. I said, Adam, I can't make it all the way to England right now. And they ended up flying down to Nicaragua. Lord Carnarvon. I mean, this was the godson to the queen.
yeah.
And he flies down, no qualms, no security, no, just flies down to Nicaragua.
Yep.
And, for me, it's fancy things, wealth. I'm not too impressed by these things too much personally. It is, the yardstick is the quality of someone's character, and that makes me want to work with somebody, and does the chemistry work. And we just hit it off, man. And Lord Carnarvon was just, after seeing the process, I got access to old receipts from the Partagas factory. They have an archivist there, and it was really cool because we're not a fancy schmancy company by any means, and this is practically royalty. And it really didn't matter, that stuff didn't matter. It mattered about the synergy and chemistry, and I wanted to have a luxury line. I wanted to have a really high end. I thought there was a place for that within our portfolio. As you know, in cigar shops, if you'll look at the whole portfolio of Foundation, I did take it from the perspective of, if you only had Foundation in your humidor, as a tobacconist, you have all different palettes that come into the humidor. You have people that are looking for different price points. So I wanted to be able to have a portfolio for all those different customers that walked in through that door. So Highclere fit as far as, being an elegant, high end, the history, fit into the rest of the portfolio. And the brand has really, grown significantly. I think at first people were kind of confused. They didn't know it was a Foundation project, and they didn't really understand the story. And then as people learn the story, it really contributed to the brand growing, and they realize it's not a gimmick. I'm not a gimmicky kind of guy. It's got to be real. So, and we're just gearing up to launch next month. They asked us to do the 100th year anniversary box.
The tomb.
Let me turn my light here.
Beauty.
Mind if I turn out my light?
Go ahead.
Dark here first. Let's see.
Brief intermission.
Brief intermission. You got to do another clap.
A little sip.
Need another clap. Yeah, so this is going to be coming out hopefully in November. It's not supposed to have the wrap on it, but I'm just trying to protect it. But this is a replica of a box that was found within King Tut's tomb. So November 1922 is when Howard Carter and the 5th Earl of Carnarvon discovered the infamous King Tut's tomb. So they asked me to do a 100-year anniversary cigar, and they're actually cool. They're launching a beautiful, gin that's been cured in whiskey barrels. To go along with these cigars. So it's a nice celebratory, something special to just for the 100-year. So
Cool.
yeah. So, and then Rogan, these things just happen, man. Sometimes I've always been a fan of Joe. Joe's podcast actually reminds me of why I love working in cigar shops, right? You work in a cigar shop and, at a young age, I would meet so many different people from so many different walks of life that really provided perspective on life. And I learned so much from, talking, as a cigar shop, it becomes more than just cigars. It's everybody's going through life, man, trials and tribulations, ups and downs. And, Joe's podcast we already had a lot of similar interests, of guests that he would have on. And I've just always been a big fan. And a friend of mine who through Cigars lives out in LA, and he saw how much I loved Rogan. And he started, I want to say 2020, they would do Sober October, which they're doing this month.
Yeah, right.
And that's when he, I saw him smoking cigars here and there. And my buddy's like, make up a couple boxes and I'm going to get him the cigars. I was like, how are you going to do it? He's like, don't worry about it. We're going to get him to him. So we just kind of put out the intent that we were going to do it. So my art team did a couple of hand painted boxes for him, and it was months going by and it was just not happening. Then Joe was announcing he's moving from LA to Texas.
Right.
And I'm like, dude, don't try to get it to him, because the last thing you want when you're moving is another box. So, after months, he happened to meet one of Joe's friends who happened to be going to his house that weekend to visit Joe at his new house. And he brought him these 2 boxes. And I was watching the podcast one day and I see it was September 11th, 2020. And I see our ashtray on
the
table. And I was like, holy shit, that's our ashtray. The ashtrays on the table. And then kind of another month went by and he actually pulled the box out on election day. He had a special podcast and started smoking them. And then like a month later, I get an Instagram message. He slid into my DMs and it's like, hey, Nick, thank you so much for the cigars, this and that. And appreciate it. What do you recommend for a humidor? I want to get a humidor. Nice. And I had already had a humidor made. I had made him an LE blue humidor with his logo hand inlaid in it. And I was like, Joe, I already got you, man. And I sent him the humidor, and then I knew he's an interesting example of, he was smoking our Wise Man Maduro. I could tell by what he was eating as far as food. He liked spicy barbecue. He liked more of these peaty scotches.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, he's a newer smoker, but he likes more of a fuller bodied smoke. So I knew Connecticut broadleaf would be in his wheelhouse. So I kind of did a tweaked version of the Tabernacle blend. When I did Tabernacle, I had about 7 blends that a number of them could have made the final cut. So I kind of made up a version of that and made him his own smoke. And he's, you know, it's amazing, man. He's been really supportive, and, you know, just, I haven't met him yet, but, you know,
One day.
he's been giving us shout outs and
Yeah,
really supportive of Foundation. It's amazing. So
Yeah,
I had a
hopefully
couple
when Joe Rogan sees this podcast, he'll invite you over to.
There we go. We got to send it to him, man.
God.
You know, I've been trying to educate him just about Connecticut, and I think it's great because, you know, I'm trying to hit out different outlets. We don't grow as an industry really that much.
Yeah.
You know, like the industry stays pretty small. It's
Yeah.
such a small industry.
Yeah.
Industries go. So I really, you know, would like to see, you know, new people learn about and get into the industry. And I think he's a great platform for that. So,
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to, when discussing that Highclere Castle, you mentioned a little bit about how people didn't even maybe connect it to Foundation early on. And the whole history and culture thing is something I am so interested in. I love history. I'm a history nerd to an extent as well. I've been fortunate enough to live in 6 countries in my, you know, young life so far. And, you know, my favorite thing about moving around so much has just been emerging in the culture of all these different places in the world. It's been amazing. And I mean, another one of those things when reading the story of El Huehuense and like just the fascinating history behind this, something I had no idea about before, lifts the cigar so much. And you and Alex Garcia, another beautiful motif with the whole new Olmec line. It's really, really, I mean, well done. How, because you're independent, so you can do a lot of stuff you want yourself. And obviously you're pouring your own interests into these brands, right? But there's one factor that is the market, right? Like you have to think about what will attract people a little bit, right? Like how hard is that to, because you might want to nerd out and do something so obscure that people might not connect at all, you know, like how's that whole process?
You know, well, Wednesday was that like total nerd out project, because obviously I knew it would be very difficult for people to pronounce. You know, it's not even a Spanish word. It's a Nahuatl word, indigenous to Nicaragua. But that had a rhyme and a reason when I first started, because nobody knew who I was, man, in 2015. I was completely behind the scenes and on the manufacturing side. So there was a smaller group of hardcore cigar smokers, hardcore retailers that kind of knew who I was and what my experience was. So I knew they would get it. And I knew that was a good target market. And I knew I wanted to really pay homage to this place that's become my second home. So hence, you know, I went with the Huehuense, you know, version. And as you see, since that time, you know, the names are Charter Oak, you know, Tabernacle, Olmec, you know, these are much more simpler names, because branding, people are not, most consumers are not into it like we're into it, you know. So you cannot confuse the messaging, as you know, it becomes very confusing for people, and it's overwhelming for cigar smokers in general. You walk into a humidor, I mean, you're overwhelmed by all these brands, you know, all these different names. So I've really tried to simplify, you know, the branding in general. After that point, that was kind of the plan from the beginning. And of course, Foundation is an easier name. So it is trying to get this balance between the branding, marketing side, and authenticity, of course, and things that I really, you know, love and enjoy. And then we have those projects that are a little bit more on the creative side, like the Lanceros get a little bit more creative with the artwork, or, you know, some of these more limited things we're able to get a little bit more creative. But Olmec, you know, and again, another just obscure kind of
Right.
very important historical civilization that most people don't know about.
Yeah.
And that's what I hope is like, people, well, you can take it to different levels, right? Some people don't even, they say they don't care about the brand, it's not about the branding. Some people get too far into the branding, right? It's nice because I don't have to sit at a board of 12 people. I think sometimes what happens with that is by the time you get all these opinions and everything, it gets watered down.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're
Right.
left with is not, there's no meat left on the bone.
Yeah.
So I do feel fortunate that, I get to do what I love to do. And I think that translates, right? Because it's like, if I don't love it, I think that translates more than whether it's directly or subconsciously, like, do I love it? And am I passionate about it? And, Alex, my art director, we've been friends for so long. We have a lot of similar interests. So we just, I'm the conductor, you know what I mean? And he's putting it all together, but I'm able to, take my understanding of the market and, kind of the vision I want to get for the brand. And then we work, we're like two sides of a coin.
That's awesome.
I think it kind of just works. Olmec, it's where all the tobacco comes from, in San Andreas. Like, this is the same region where tobacco has been grown for, we don't even know how long. I mean, that's like, we go back, maybe 3,000 years, but they don't even know much about the Olmec civilization at all.
Yeah. Wow.
We know tobacco, we know they were building pyramids, like all the calendars come from them.
Wow.
But they're pretty much unknown, and not many people know about them.
Yeah.
Well, Wednesday is the same. I never heard about Wednesday.
Yeah.
No, same.
You have this literary masterpiece, and we don't learn about these things usually. So
It's a very, very cool way of spreading the stories, like through their cigars. And it shows, I mean, I guess that's your passion as well, combining cigars with the history. That really has been the reason for that.
Yeah, because for so many years I wasn't on the branding. I was just creating the blends and the tobacco side. So to be able to complement the blends with packaging and branding that I love has just kind of been natural. It's like, I mean, and again, it's, I'm not a big fan of, like, gimmicks have their place and whatnot, but I've always been focused on trying to create brands that hopefully will be around for a long time, well past when I'm gone.
Right. Yeah. We've been talking a lot about now, like, your passions within the foundation and all that. And I mean, the public has seen your passion and greeted it with, presenting your cigars with a bunch of, especially from Cigar Aficionado, who's put your cigars in their top 25 several times, as high as top 3 even. And we've been talking now a lot about as well your passions within foundation. But what would you say, what is your biggest goal or dream as a cigar maker? Is it more the scores that warm your heart, or is it the public reception?
Yeah, I mean, public reception is where it's at. I think. Listen, the accolades are great, especially for me, Cigar Aficionado, because I have a personal connection to Cigar Aficionado. Just the time period I started smoking cigars, and I think really what they did for the industry is, they really did change the industry in the time period that they came out. So I have that personal connection. I mean, there's so many, great, bloggers too, magazine, Cigar Snob, Cigar Press, Half Wheel. So accolades are great, but at the end of the day, business are people buying your cigars? Are they taking money out of it? Are they going to come back and buy that cigar again. That's the true testament
Of course.
you know, whether it's successful or not. All these things help, right?
Mhm.
And accolades are great, but to see somebody enjoy, you know, one of your cigars, or to get a message from somebody saying, you know, oh man, I was in, you know, Rome, and you know, with my family, and I enjoyed this cigar. Or, you know, my daughter graduated from school, and you know, I had you, like,
Yeah, of
that's
course,
huge.
that's the bottom line, and it'll always mean the most. I
Yeah.
understand that.
But a 99 from Cigar Aficionado, I mean,
That's the dream. That's the dream. Okay, we got it.
that's a good dream. 99.
Yeah.
Did you have a follow-up, Lad?
100. What's that?
No, it was if there was like a tangible goal or something like that. And I mean,
The overall goal for me, you know, generally as the company, is to build a brand that, you know, that is a staple within the humidors, right? And that does take time and brand building.
Yeah.
But, you know, to be able to have that brand recognition where it's, you know, it's not, you know, you're not struggling to kind of stay alive, or and you always have to be on the top of your game in this industry, right? There's so many things to choose from in the humidor. I overall goal is, you know, to be able to have a brand that, you know, 100 years from now it's still around. That would be awesome, you know.
God. I could be around in this Zoom for another 100 years. I'll tell you, like we haven't barely scratched the surface of all the questions we have, but yeah, there are airport pickups that need to happen. I just wanted to end it on one last one. We have a lot of follower questions we put on Instagram, but to leave it on a high note, because that was a pretty maybe a little more profound question, Lad. We have another guy from New Haven, pistol waving, Andrew May Reno. He just wanted to ask you, you know, is it Pepe's Pizza or is it Sally's Modern? That's the heavy hitting question for last.
Holy cow. I mean, this is an intense question.
More profound than you thought, lad.
So historically, I've always was, if I had to choose, a Sally's. So my father was pretty friendly with the Consiglios, with Flo, the owner. And I know Rick and Bob, the sons that actually smoke cigars. Okay. They ended up selling not too long ago. And since that time, they're still around consulting, but since that time, I've tended to lean more towards Pepe's now. And Pepe's has multiple locations. I'm really only a New Haven location guy, but they have actually 2 ovens. The original oven is in the back, which they don't know. So I've eaten so much pizza that I started being able to tell the difference between the front oven and the back oven. And the back oven is almost like smoking. If you're a pipe smoker, you know, if you smoke a briar pipe, you know the difference between a pipe that's really seasoned compared to a newer pipe. And not to say that the front oven is not, but the back oven, being the older oven, definitely has a seasoning to it that really makes a difference. And it also depends too, is on who's making the pie that night. I mean, you know, and who's watching the oven. Modern is another, it's all phenomenal pizza, man. Like it's crazy. If you ever get a chance, check out Pizza, A Love Story. It's a documentary. I think you can get it for free on their website.
Oh, okay.
But it's actually the whole history of pizza here in New Haven. And you know, they're coal ovens, so it's not wood fire, which a lot of ovens are. So it adds a whole different flavor to the pizza. But yeah, people don't think about New Haven. It's grown in popularity. So it's been tough to get into Sally's now, because they've really attracted a younger. Sally's was a no joke place. Like, you walked into Sally's, you might wait 10 minutes to get a drink, 15 minutes. You know, they didn't care Like they weren't the business minded, like they were trying to like expand. And it was like you were walking into their living room, like really. So people that didn't understand, they'd be like, oh, like I would, and the more you resisted, the more it would get bad for you. Now they have a different kind of, they're more into the, it's a whole different vibe. It's great because they're doing really well, but it was tough when they sold.
So that's the moral of the story: don't sell, and foundation will never leave.
No, I mean, listen, you could sell. God bless them. Sorry, we got some fire engines going here, but God bless them. And I hope they enjoy. But it's a different vibe. It's like, again, the difference between smaller cigar makers and a corporation making cigars. Like if you don't have the right people that are passionate and in it, not making them a widget, there's a different mentality. If it's a widget, it's a widget. If you're passionate about cigars and tobacco, that's a whole different product that comes out, and not everybody can notice that difference.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's not important to a lot of people, but for us that are really into it, it is.
That was more profound than I expected.
Yeah.
Yeah. It makes a huge difference, But
well, Nick, thank you for that. Thank you for taking the time. Really, it's been an absolute blast. It's been the fastest hour of this year for me, probably. This
my pleasure. We'll have to do this again, man. We'll make
gladly
we'll make some time, or maybe we can do a IG live or something like that.
Oh, yeah, I'd love it.
But
absolutely,
yeah, we'll keep in touch and try to set something up. Maybe first quarter next year or something.
Definitely, would love it.
Perfect.
If you're listening, do yourself a favor and try anything of the portfolio. Like you said, there's going to be something that you're going to like, and I can guarantee that for sure from my experience too. Thank you so much, Nick.
Thank you.
Thanks,
guys.
Nick. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. My pleasure.